Hi, Gowie here. I want to talk to you about the ability that we have genetically to restructure the neural connections in our brains. We're spiritual beings having a human experience. And what that means is that we start out as babies. And there's a huge spectrum of environments that human babies can be born into. And the human babies that are born into safe, loving, nurturing, stimulating environments are able to have a very straightforward, um, organized development of the neural pathways in their brain. They have a strong sense of self worth. They have the ability to use and regulate their personal power. The babies that are born in this huge variety of less than perfect households are subject to their environment, and they have a lot of experiences that can be very confusing and painful and can cause them to question their self-worth, and many times it will turn their personal power inward and generate a negative kind of energy. We have genetically the ability to rewire our brains so that no matter what kind of an environment that we lived in, that we can reroute our brains and use the blueprint from the spiritual being. Because I believe, and I have a whole lot to talk about what I believe about the spiritual realm, but I believe that in the spiritual realm that knowledge is universal, and that all of these experiences of spiritual beings having human lifetimes, that they have accumulated a lot of knowledge. And this knowledge is able to be transferred from the spiritual being to the material being. I am not a young soul. I'm not a very old soul, but I'm at a place in my connection between the spiritual realm and the material realm that I have gained some information that I think is important and that I would like to um, talk to you about. The microglial cells in our body are, their job is to prune dendrites. And the Schwann cells in our body are designed to create new neural connections. These connections don't have to be formed when we're young, when the stem cells are turning into neurons. We can form neural connections. We can rework the pathways of the brain. And this happens with a transference of this information from the spiritual being to the material being, which has caused me to spend quite a lot of time studying cellular biology, because I have a couple of wonderful friends that I pray with, and when I am doing these prayers, the prayers are being transmitted through me, and over time these prayers have developed a stream of consciousness. So when we are praying, we have been talking about, we've gone through a phase where we were really talking about the human body being a collection of cells, and each cell being alive. And we've talked a lot about how it is that living cells even came into being, and that's an interesting topic. But in the cell, we talked about that when you are learning to meditate and you're learning to quiet your mind, and the process of doing that is an interesting topic. That in the place of silence, that you can sense a reverberation, and that this vibration is the sound of the heavenly choir. And that the healing energy can flow through into the cellular level, and that the cells can become a collection of molecules, and the molecules can become atoms. And because the atoms have some mass, they exist as atoms, but they're vibrating in unison with the heavenly choir. When I was going through these prayers, my dear friend Kenneth was cured of his bone marrow cancer. And then I became really questioning what it was that was creating this sort of a healing, and what had actually happened. And my housekeeper and dear friend, Becca, is a person who was raised as a Jehovah's Witness. And she has an autoimmune disease, and so we began trying to create a healing prayer for her. And I was trying hard and have another friend who also had been a Jehovah's Witness and was a recovering Jehovah's Witness, and gave me quite a bit of insight into her beliefs, how she had been trained as a child. And I was reading about the molecules of emotion and the transmitting molecules, and began to study cellular biology. And I had a experience with my EMDR therapy and the alpha stim that I felt like the connection between the spiritual being and the material being was actually the mitochondria. That it was like a translator, and I became very curious about the mitochondria, and then I became even more curious about cellular biology. And I found that if the knowledge of how to reprogram the brain is being transmitted through the mitochondria, then it has to get from the mitochondria out into the connective tissue or the blood. It has to be expressed through the membrane of the cell. And so I became very curious about how that was actually happening. And I learned about I hope I'm saying this correctly, the endoplasmic reticulum. And that this is the connection between the spiritual being and the material being, is in that connection between the mitochondria and the endoplasmic reticulum. And one thing that greatly affects the endoplasmic reticulum is stress. So this explains a lot. The ability to control your emotions, the ability to have perspective on your life. And I think it's also an attitude that's partly, what we think of as our personality, that this is the expression of the spiritual being, that the choices we make are based on an attitude or an expression, that we have the same tendencies and we run into the same types of experiences over and over. And some of us have very easy lives because maybe we need to take a break, or maybe we have always had a experience where we did a positive thing and had a positive result. did a positive thing, had a positive result. Because when the spiritual being first experiences the material world, it's maybe as a algae or a virus or fungus that maybe a grass, maybe a mosquito. And the thing that happens is that actions have reactions. So if it could be that our human emotions are molecules, and that somehow we're transmitting between our mind and body and soul all the time. So this information needs to get over, and it has to do with stress. And part of this has to do with facing up to the things in your life that happen over and over and over again. And you need to have a different way of dealing with it. I love the idea of the Greek god Fortune, that Fortune could smile on you or Fortune could frown on you, and it had nothing to do with you, that Fortune was fickle. But some people believe that Fortune always behaved in the way in which it needed to, she needed to. But the way, if Fortune smiles on you, you need to be generous and kind. And if Fortune frowns on you, you need to be positive and brave. And Fortune will smile on you. If she has frowned on you, she will smile on you if you act positive and brave. And she will keep smiling on you if you are kind and generous. So we have the experience of having every action we have a reaction. And we go through more complex organisms that have more complex relationships and that have communication, and we keep accumulating experiences. And in the Chinese proverb, to see is to forget, to hear is to remember, to do is to understand. So by doing, we generate understanding, and understanding becomes knowledge. And in the spiritual world, knowledge is universal. So this accumulation of knowledge is in the spiritual world. And we have the ability to change the neurologic wiring in our brain. The microglial cells can prune dendrites and change neural pathways, and make it be so that these memories of suffering and anxiety and fear, that those experiences still exist. They just don't have a main highway going through them anymore. It's kind of like the interstate highway system, only this is one that's really good. The need to relax, have perspective, look at the trajectories of your life. Is fortune smiling on you, or is fortune frowning on you? And if fortune is frowning on you, then you start falling into the category of an old friend of mine who was from Africa. And she said, when God notices that you're off your path, He shoves you back on. And it's never good to be shoved by God. Some people choose cruelty. Some people suck energy from other people, and they like it. And sometimes they can become very powerful because they're good at what they do. But eventually it starts backfiring. And each lifetime it starts to have more pain involved in it. And then they begin to get a little perspective. And when they start expressing kindness, they start having better results. And then they start doing better, but that's just a transition between someone who is expressing their lifetimes as human beings in a way that causes suffering to other people. And then you have to have the people who are suffering, and they are in a place where they're experiencing suffering. And all of this knowledge is going into the spiritual realm. So, the big thing is that when human beings first became human beings, there weren't very many of us. And for a long, long time, there weren't very many of us. And then suddenly, the population just zoomed up in the air. So, the number of people that are alive on this planet right now are mostly young souls. And there are old souls, there are older souls, and there are old souls. But the planet population is mostly young souls. And I personally just believe that the average soul age of the planet Earth is about 3 years old. And so people, I mean, if you think about how a 3-year-old behaves, they're mine, 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 mine. They want you to do what they want to do, and they don't like it if you don't. And they get really cranky and can have fits. They're super clear about what they want. And they have been known to bite. And if you look at the behavior of the planet, there's a lot of discord. A lot of discord. Now, if we can survive being 3 years old, I think we have a pretty good chance of making it as a species. But it's a little touch and go right now with what we've done to the planet and everything. But there's a lot of interesting topics to talk about. And I'd also like to have healing prayer. So, it's been a pleasure. Good night.